Alrighty, kia ora tātou, welcome everyone. We don't have a Christian minister with us this morning. We'd normally open with a prayer, so I will just open us with a karakia. E rā I taminui te rā, whiti mai ruka, whiti mai rāro, kia pia te ti, kia wana te ti, kia rito te ti, kia tau mai te Māori, haumi e, hui e, tai ki e. Kia ora and welcome everyone. I'm just, before you jump up, Peter, I'm just going to welcome Brendan just to introduce today. And so please welcome Brendan and welcome to members of the public that will be submitting this morning.
Good morning, Council. The purpose of this report is to receive the written submissions on the Local Water Done Well consultation, to hear oral submitters from the submitters and to ask questions of those submitters. And I will note that there's no change in the lineup that I'm aware of, so what is as per the agenda is, as far as I'm aware, as how it should go today. Also, importantly for officers, it would be useful throughout the course of the hearing if you identify or highlight any key issues, topics or questions that have arisen from those written or oral submissions that you particularly want more information on or answers to for next week's deliberations. This week is the hearing, next week is the deliberations and the decision, but in order to make informed and considered decisions next week, there may be, like I say, some topics that you say, you know, I want some more information about this, I have a question about this, can you please go away and get me the information or the advice? In terms of the written submissions, just a very brief summary. So from the consultation, 44.6% preferred option 1 and 50.36% preferred option 3, which was Council's preferred option. I think it's reasonable to characterise that as a slim majority preferring option 3, but a sizable minority seeking option 1. As you can see, option 2 and did not respond were negligible. In terms of the second question that was asked, ranking the factors that influence your view, they are in some ways illustrative, and you can see the percentages there. But I do note the limitations of that question because people could select multiple responses, and that can be illustrated by the fact that the most important factor that influenced people's views, ranked number 1, 123% of the 100% respondents responded to that question. But clearly for most people, affordability and community influence are the most important factors, with affordability leading the way by a significant amount there. Unless there are any questions on any of that, I'm very happy to pass over to the first speaker, or back to you, Mr. Mayor.
Alrighty, team, any questions for Brendan? No, that's cool. So just as far as the agenda goes, there's no apologies that I can see. We'll kick into public forum. There won't, we'll just take this off now. No urgent business or minor nature that anyone wants to raise. I think we'll just keep focused on water. No conflicts of interest. We'll move now to the first submitter. So welcome, Peter. So Peter, welcome, and we'll put the microphone in front of you, and you've got 10 minutes, and save some time for questions as well, if you like.
Thank you for that. I am a bit down, even with hearing aids. I'm not too good in the hearing department. Past and present councils have served the Timaru district well, providing an excellent three-water service with infrastructure in good order and replacing ageing pipes ongoing. And I know the water mains in our street, they've just renewed them recently, and the pipe on the west side, they had to dig a trench down the footpath because those big power cables from the high tension power cables from Grants Hill, they were buried there, and it meant they had to dig around stormwater and sewage pipes and power cables and phone cables and lay those big steel plates over each drive. So it's a big job, and you can understand where the cost comes from. The Timaru District Council have selected option 3, joining with neighbouring councils to set up a new water organisation. But do we need another over-regulated utility like electricity? Well, no, we don't. Lion Trust South Canterbury have 5 directors distributing a few dollars off power accounts occasionally, off one power account occasionally. So has it passed its use-by date, and would the funds be better used by Alpine Energy updating its network? The government winter power payments are a better scheme, larger payments over 3 months, with the payment directed at those that need it. The proposed option 3, CCO organisation with council-appointed directors, sounds similar to Lion Trust South Canterbury, paid for by the ratepayer. And do the ratepayers need a separate water bill? Nothing much about the cost of setting up the organisation, just it would probably be cheaper and potentially reducing the cost to the consumer. Google has provided a good service giving detail about what is happening with other New Zealand councils. Oamaru and Waimate opting for in-house. Big is not always better, with ECAN, Auckland and Wellington councils often making news for all the wrong reasons. And does the old adage apply? If it ain't broke, don't try and fix it. If the majority of New Zealand councils opt for in-house, then that may send a signal to the government they want less rates and regulations and not another electricity reform disaster on their hands. That's it.
Thank you. Questions for Peter? Just a comment, regulation, it will be regulated, whether we want to define it as over-regulated or not. And that's something that all local government and central government parties have welcomed, partly because there hasn't been any regulation in place, and that's part of the problem. So there's two regulators coming in. One is the water regulator, so that used to sit with the health department. So that's around setting standards. And then the other one is the Commerce Commission regulator. So the theory around the Commerce Commission is that that will keep your investment to a level. So into the future, it will actually be Commerce Commission, like the lines companies, that are setting the price. So if councils or water entities aren't investing enough money into their water asset, they will be told to invest. So there won't be any choice. That cost will be put on them. They won't have any choice. So there's going to be a lot that comes through the regulation no matter what. So we're trying to set ourselves up for success. Regulation will come no matter what.
But your decision to go with option 3, did the councillors have a vote on that? Any input into that?
Yeah, we've been on this path for a wee while now, yeah, a few years, yeah.
Good.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks, Peter, and I appreciate you submitting as you have done previously. So, welcome now. Is Matt here? No? That's all right. Come back to Matt when he's available. Dennis? Welcome, Dennis. Yeah, okay to go early? And Dennis's submission is on page 292. Sorry, I meant to say before. And if you just refer to the top numbers on the pages for the correct submission. So welcome, Dennis. Floor is yours.
Thank you for the opportunity to comment. I'd like to particularly address myself to the 4 factors. And thank you very much for the document in the newspaper. It was very useful. Affordability is number 1. When they look for life on Mars, they look for water. It's a basis of life and it cannot be taken for granted, although we do take it for granted. I was just reading this morning of some places where they've had tragedies, and the first thing that they have to do is get clean water, because health goes down the drain if you don't. So it's I think Timaru is quite good on these things. We, I think, led the nation on 3-bin, and when the 3-bin was coming in, a very experienced councillor said to me, "We can't afford it, Dennis." And I said, "We cannot not afford it if you look to the future." And I think the same applies to water. Cultural input. I take this to mostly refer to Maori culture. The current cultural climate is very broad, from no such thing to sacred cow. There are sensible ideas, though, worth considering. In the land wars, the British Army assaulted the Maori fortifications at Gate Pa in Tauranga. Their casualties were horrendous. General Campbell afterwards said he would never again mount such an attack. One historian commented, "What a pity he'd not talked to the generals before World War I. He could have avoided several million casualties." Not just general wisdom culturally, but particular. In one of my classes, we had a very bright young Maori lass, lively and outgoing. Many of us were worried she would get out of hand and into trouble. And one morning, she wasn't there. She'd been sent up north for others to raise, the whānau. As I said to my wife, if we Pākehās handed over our kids to other people to raise, we would have been considered failures. Cultural factors should be considered objectively on their merits. Community influence. This may have less depth and experience than cultural, and it can be more volatile. We all have our hobby horses. A look around our world today, and we can see that popular opinion can be notoriously unreliable. The buck will stop here, thank goodness. Access to finance. When a war is declared, no one worries about the cost. Similarly, water is not a negotiable quantity, it is a must. Money will have to be found, so other things may miss out, things which we cherish. Thank you for listening, and thank you for your service on the council, even if I don't always agree with you. If it is an encouragement to you, as a man of faith, I pray for the council every Wednesday morning. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dennis, and that's very kind. We appreciate that. Any questions for Dennis? No? Pretty succinct. I appreciate that, and thank you for taking the time.
Thank you.
Have we got Wayne here? Yeah, perfect. Welcome, Wayne. And Wayne's submission is on page 72. Welcome, Wayne. Thanks for coming and speaking with us. Floor's yours, so yep, just at your leisure.
Yeah, thanks very much. Mine's perhaps not as quite as full out as what the other presentations have been. I really have just majorly one question for the councillors and possibly some supplementaries after that. So really my major thing is I'd just like a show of hands from the councillors who are in favour of putting water meters on private homes in the next 3 years and charging water rates.
So I can answer that. Water meters are in the plan. So they got put in to the plan in about 2016, maybe? Yeah, so they're doing some work on getting the right meter, but that will come, at some point. And the positive thing about water meters, I think a lot of people look at it as a negative, but if you look to some of the earlier areas, and just let's use Timaru for example, houses that are built in the 50s, a lot of those pipes will be leaking. So when you put meters on, you find the leaks, and it means often that you can actually put back other investment. So they reckon when you put on water meters, you save about 25% once all the leaks have been found over a period of time. So the way water meters has worked for a lot of councils is not actually around charging, but it's around finding the leaks in the system. So that's the approach that we've taken, and that was decided some time ago, 9 odd years ago, I think, and we haven't gone back to it because it's going to be a standard anyway over time.
Okay. I didn't realise that, to be quite honest, because nothing was said about water meters. That's why I've asked the question.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
So, all right, then I do have some supplementaries, that
Yep.
being the situation. So when do you envisage that meters will be on all houses then?
It might go to Andrew Lester. So we've only got funding at the moment for initial lot of meters. So where are we at, Andrew? Thank you.
So year 4 of LTP, we start a program of starting to roll out water meters. Now that's, should we say, seed funding, so it's not a blanket across everywhere, it's the start off to go through. So it'll probably take then another 4 to 5 years to get them out across everywhere, funding dependent.
So that, you're saying in 4 to 5 years you'll be able to have done Timaru?
We would start, and so it's year 4 of the LTP, so we're just starting year 2 now, so there's another 2 years.
Oh, okay.
So, 3 years.
So you probably a 7-year period from now for a full
Oh, okay.
rollout. Yeah.
Okay,
So you wouldn't be in a position to charge before that full rollout anyway.
right.
Yeah.
So what is the cost per house per metre for us ratepayers?
It depends on what meter you go for. So there's anywhere from $30 to $200. They've got about a 20-year life. Coincides with the life of the Toby, so we'd be replacing the hardware around there as well at the same time.
So the meters get capitalised and they're depreciated over time. So a ratepayer won't be required to pay up front. It'll be built into our capital plan.
Right,
And then it gets depreciated over time.
okay. So currently each house is allocated so much money or so much water per year, is that right? And
No.
we pay rates
No.
on that?
No.
It depends where you live, only on the rural schemes.
Oh, okay.
So if you're in the town schemes, no, not at all.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. So have you got a total cost of what you estimate it's going to cost to put meters right throughout South Canterbury or in the towns?
It's probably quite early for us to be able to say. So they're looking at what the best option is around meters. There's probably some comparisons. So the likes of Mackenzie and Waimea have put in meters of late, haven't they, into the townships? I'm not sure what their costing is.
Yeah, so if we use their costings and scale it, it's around 10 to 12 million, but saying that each time they come through, as the technology is progressing, it's coming down in price.
Oh, okay.
So one of the way I look at it, twice I've had, where I live, I've had a majorly flooded back lawn, and I live next to some flats, and it took City Care to come out to put a water meter on the front, and then 3 different plumbers to isolate which house it was coming from.
Right.
And that took about 2 months to actually work through that, and that was with neighbours that were willing to work. We're all quite friendly, and so that was a phenomenal amount of water that was leaking into the system. So you could easily expect 20% of our water is leakage. Would that be fair? Yeah.
Yeah, we're probably just over 20% at the moment. In every area jurisdiction that's put in water meters and not charging for them, just putting them in to measure and manage it, save the money. It just needs that capital investment up front.
Okay. All right.
But we also shouldn't be afraid of the charging, because at the moment we all pay equal. And people that live by themselves use a lot less water than, say, a family of 3 or 4.
Yeah.
So we shouldn't be afraid of that.
It's just if we're just afraid of the rates, that's all. I think,
Yeah.
you know, it's.
Well, at the
you know,
moment,
it's
you're
nearly-
getting, at the
nearly
moment,
40
you're getting rates and there'll be a substitution. If we went on to meter charging, you pay for what you use rather than just a flat sum.
Yeah, no, I get that. It's just that it's just another added cost on to people who are on fixed incomes.
Yeah.
You know,
It's-
you know,
I'd-
our rates, what, 40% they've gone up in 3 years?
I see more as a substitution.
Sorry?
It's more of a substitution than an extra.
Well, yeah, it's still going to go on, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know?
But, I mean, you highlight the point of why this conversation's happening around the country is that unaffordability of rates, and it's largely driven around infrastructure increases. So it's water, it's bridges, it's roads, and so that's why successive governments with very different approaches are looking at the water space. So, yeah.
Yeah, I know. No, it's cool. Thank you very much.
No worries, thank you. Appreciate it. Really,
I'll just take the point of just saying that what we need to do is change people's views, that water is actually a commodity that has a value. At the moment, it gets piped into a house. People don't even understand, a lot of people don't understand that water is treated to the highest level it can be to meet international standards. And it's not just drunk, it's done, everything is done with it. So the moment you put a meter on the front of the house and everyone gets an allocation, once they go over that, they start charging. People start using it sparingly, they use it properly, and again, the cost to us to treat it in terms of what we do in having a demand, it reduces our costs overall and what have you. We don't start having to look for other areas where we can get, water from and all that sort of thing. So it has a massive value to it.
I absolutely get that, and it's very similar to electricity. You know, like my power bill is different to what your power bill is, as is wood water. Absolutely. But, you know, I understand the concept. I just didn't know anything about whether the council was looking at putting on meters at all, so, yeah.
yeah.
So
Fantastic
anyway, thanks for
question.
fronting up
Thank
for
you.
that one.
Well
No,
done.
no, good, great question. So, yeah, appreciate you being involved.
Thank you.
Thanks, Wayne.
Okay.
Steph, sorry, can you just look at your phone? Thank you. Is Kay Griffiths here? No? Okay. So, and then... Yeah, no, that's okay. No? I'll just check. We'll just pause for 1 minute, team. Thanks, Graham. I really do appreciate you speaking and submitting, because you've got a view that I think needs to be heard. So, yeah, happy for you to just, talk to a couple of those points that are important to you, if that's okay.
Thank you, Nigel. I certainly didn't come prepared to speak. But anyway, I have been concerned about the consultation process right from the word go. I mean, fair enough, council put a paper out in our weekly periodical, which most people don't really open. If you go to, a lot of them are still sitting in letterboxes. You advertised a bit, obviously, on Facebook, but a lot of people simply do not see it on Facebook. So I think the whole partition process has been seriously flawed in that people have not been given the real opportunity to have some input. And I think something as important as this should really have gone to a submission process. It's the only way you're going to get a fair view of what the community really thinks.
Oh, sorry, you mean a referendum?
Sorry, referendum, yes,
Yeah,
I did,
yeah.
sorry. Yes. Now, I know there would have been costs involved in that, but of course those costs would have been largely insignificant as to what the setup costs of a new organisation would be. So it sort of pales into significance, really. But, it also concerns me that there is a serious amount of apathy about the whole thing. I think people have had basically a guts full of water from Mahuta's Three Waters scam. They see your option as the chosen option, they see the cheaper price, and they automatically would have perhaps gone for option 3 anyway, or felt that there was no point in consulting, simply because you guys had made it very clear what your choice was. And in some ways, I'm a bit critical of that process too. I think under the legislation, I'm not sure, but it may have been relaxed a little bit, but you've used ratepayers' money to push your view. And I don't know whether that should actually be...
We have to, under legislation, put a preferred view. That's part of it.
I gathered that.
Yeah.
Had the legislation been changed, in fact, to provide for that?
It's always been the case, hasn't it? Sorry, Stephen, do you want to speak to that?
Yep, under the LGNA, we have to put out what we are proposing and then ask whether or not the public agrees with that or not, and then show people the other options as well. But in all cases, we always put out a preferred option.
A preferred option, yeah. Yeah.
Right. I mean, we've seen enormous amounts of money spent from the Three Waters scam, your defence of that, the amount of money that would have gone into writing the legislation. We now see National's watered down view of that, but of course much of that legislation is the same, but we have literally spent billions on it. Now, if the government was truly concerned about water quality, that money, they could be providing funding that councils could draw on, outside of the LGFA, in fact. And you've probably had my last letter about concerns I have with the LGFA as well. And I believe at the back of that, we have some of the American finance companies, which is quite disconcerting, really. But I do think this whole funding thing for councils has been not handled particularly well. Part of that problem lies at the doorstep of LGNZ. I mean, I think they have been an unsuccessful advocacy group. They should have been advocating on the legislation for a start, probably the demise of Te Mauta Arowai, and canvassing government for better funding, perhaps release of GST, for instance. And I'm not sure, do we still get petrol tax back from the government? Is that something that I know in my days here we used to?
Yeah, it technically does come back through our funding of roads, sort of, but not to the degree that we wish.
Right, okay. Yeah, so I think the lack of funding that councils work, but I think you do remarkably well for what you do. I mean, I'm not saying that everything you do is perfect, because I mean, there's some stupid things we do, but overall, your value for money. Now central government isn't. I mean, their handling of our finances, I think, is totally dismal in what they do with it. But anyway, that's, yeah, we're probably not going to change that in the short term. But we do see, as a question for that funding, I mean, I think New Zealand's at the stage where we need to get our own sort of backyard in shape, really, before we start giving sort of money to the Ukraine and new energy projects and things like that. I mean, we are slipping in terms of world standards, and I think that overall, that is disconcerting. Now, forming a CCO, nothing will ever convince me that once you put an organisation in that has a high-level board, together with the establishment costs of setting up the CCO, which you've estimated to be 10 million. I mean, you look at some other organisations, they're talking 13 million. Now, clearly, by the time if you pay that back over a, say, 10-year period, that's going to be a minimum of $1 million a year anyway without interest charges. Now, and then on top of that, of course, you've got your board at $350,000 a year, your CEO and your CFO at $700,000 a year. So you're paying back $2 million in overhead before you even put a spade in the ground. And that's a lot of money to recover from, what, 30,000 consumers? And I just cannot relate to that. I don't think it's necessary, and I just think it creates an unnecessary burden on the end user. I mean, you've got your figures. I mean, some of which you've probably got more figures than I've been privy to, but it doesn't stack up in my view. And there's so many unknowns about a CCO as well. I mean, I was probably a little bit blasé when I said about being an unknown entity, an unaccountable entity, unknown staff, unknown management, unknown board, and unknown objectives. But on the face of it, that is what we're dealing with here. I mean, who knows? You don't know who the board's going to be. I think you've probably got a better idea of who you want to see on it. We don't know who's going to manage it. You haven't appointed a manager. We don't know how many staff you're taking across from the current organisation, whether you're taking them all over. Are you employing new staff? They're not accountable to the public. They're only accountable to council on the basis of whatever you've provided to them with some sort of statement of intent. So it's pretty much up in the air. So from my point of view, would never go down that path. I mean, I simply don't have enough information to say yes or a CCO is a good idea. And of course, if a CCO was such a good idea, I mean, why hasn't it, in fact, happened in the past? I mean, why haven't you promoted it 10 years ago? And if it's good for water and drainage, what about our roading network? Do we have a CCO for that as well? And you then get to the stage where all the responsibilities of councils suddenly get devolved into semi-private organisations. You start to question the existence of councils. I mean, we look at perhaps our cultural amenities like the art gallery and the library, and let's put them on a user pay basis to reduce the cost on the ratepayer, and all of society is suddenly disappearing. I mean, our whole functions for local communities are being affected by these decisions. I think your in-house operation obviously has done extremely well. I think you've had some good quality people. You have good quality asset management software, and I think the staff probably know how to use that. and I think by now they've probably collected an enormous amount of data and built up some pretty reasonable models of the state of our networks. So they can forecast in the future, well, they should be able to forecast in the future what work's required. So you can have quite a, I think we should have a reliable cap infrastructure maintenance plan ahead of you and be able to work with that. Now, council working with that is no different to a CCO working with it. I mean, the objective's the same. You've got your plan in place. So the cost will be the same. I mean, to suggest that the cost will be cheaper because it's a CCO doesn't really ring true. The amalgamation with Mackenzie is not going to affect how we approach our network. So the benefits of combining councils, in my view, is a bit of a look. It's aspirational, and I think there's some areas within councils where we should be combining, and that's our technical resources mainly. But I think each of those little organisations should be reasonably autonomous, have their own little democracy, if you like. But some of the technical stuff is shared and perhaps carried out by Timaru. I mean, IT is a prime example, for instance, where we have website development in-house, probably Waimate do, and Mackenzie do. But the reality is you only need one website with links to those other organisations. So there is an opportunity for sharing, but I don't think you're not going to say that, for instance, if we put a canal from Lake Tekapo underneath Burke's Pass to service Mackenzie and then come on to us, that would be a shared arrangement. But apart from that, we're not going to be sharing infrastructure. So I question the benefits of CCOs, really. The water regulator, of course, that's a carryover from Labor. And of course, tacked onto them is their Maori Advisory Group. Then, of course, you're required to now fund them with levies. Well, they're going to get $20 million a year from councils. They're already being paid by the taxpayer, and yet now councils have to pay it, so now the ratepayer has to fund them as well. So there's a real mix-up there. So are you getting your $20 million worth of value from them? And you're not. So what the hell's happening to the money? Where does it all go? It's not going to help our water situation at all. So there's another case where government extracting monies from us for no real purpose. But of course, a lot of this still comes down again to, you're probably aware of my continual beef with LGNZ. I mean, I think they're a left-leaning, totally biased organisation. I mean, the only thing they seem to be concerned about is creating Maori wards in councils. You've only got to go onto their website to look at that sort of influence. They should be campaigning for ratepayers. I mean, they were established originally to be an advocacy group for ratepayers, but they have gone past that. And like a lot of these organisations, they now just seem to be there to generate their own umbrella, if you like, to support themselves. A little bit like how ECAN's evolved, and they just seem to get bigger and bigger every year, supposedly take on new functions, but nobody sees any benefit, but we still keep paying. So I really have some serious concerns about LGNZ and their ability to provide council with value. I mean, sure, you read your minutes and they put on some great conferences, but for $60,000 a year, all of Timaru could have a conference. So I do question their thing. One of the things that, of course, is once the CCO is established, the end user has no control, right? Now, we do have some control through councillors, but of course, are the councillors really going to listen if I ring up and say, well, I'm unhappy with the water situation, whatever that may be? Because we can't do anything about that until elections, and we have lost control of that resource. I mean, the CCO, in some ways, can do their own thing, providing you've issued the statement of intent, and they keep within those boundaries. They can do what they like. They can raise as much capital as they like, do what they like. I mean, I know we heard a bit about water meters. Well, I think there's no problem. Most people don't have a problem with water meters. You know, we do see it as being inevitable. And obviously there's quite a lot of capital involved to set that up, and I think probably this will be one of the first duties of the CCO would be to do that. But again, we have no control. So that's a real worry to me. You could have a change of government, for instance, and who knows what's going to happen next year. But once the CCO is formed, they could soon be snaffled up into one very significant group and the government would put in their own management panel over it, and you can guarantee what colour they're going to be. So, yes, the CCOs worry me a fair bit, but
I'll just give you a bit, maybe just close up, and then we'll see if the team have any questions, Graham.
yes, all right. Yeah, I've sort of rambled a wee bit. And
No, that's all right. I think you've done pretty well for not being prepared, so well done. But you raised some really good points that are concerns for us around how do you get community influence through these processes. And I think what's different, and we did fight the three water model that was put up by the previous government, and part of that with our C4LD, Communities for Local Democracy group, is we knew for us to be credible, we needed to put forward another model. That model is what's been picked up by the current government and put forward, and it's around communities of interest. We're not there yet as far as, you know, different communities making the decision to work with each other, but I think over time they probably will. But it's being able to influence from the ground up. So it's a ground up model versus a top down model. And so, yeah, there's a lot of pressure in the background around this that probably the community don't see. I don't expect many councils in 3 or 4 years' time to be operating by themselves. I expect all councils will be in CCOs, whether that's right or wrong. Yeah, that's just the reality of it. Is there any questions for Graham, team? Yeah, Michelle, thanks.
Thank you for that. I just was interested in your comment about councils working together and sharing, for example, a web page designer. So, and I agree with that. But do you not see the same benefits with a CCO and a joint CCO? Like there will be certain roles where we only need one, whereas if we all go in-house, we would end up with 3. And I'm just wondering why you see it for council sharing services, but you don't see that for a CCO.
Yes, I take your point. I suppose there's clearly an opportunity always to share a technical resource, right? Now, which means our water engineers talking to their water engineers if they've got a specific problem. Now, you don't need a CCO to do that, right? They probably do it now. If we have a water main break on Caroline Bay, do Mackenzie need to know about that? So the CCO can't perform any opportunity there as well. So you've got to say, what is the CCO doing? I mean, they're not going to send a party of engineers from here to Mackenzie to assess the problem, then, well, perhaps they are, then come back and report the problem. I mean, that would be highly uneconomic. So in that case, Mackenzie would still have their own technical personnel. So I just question the value of the CCOs. The easy stuff, the complex, easy stuff should be shared. I mean, we're talking, as I say, we're talking websites, IT, accounting systems, stuff where you can put a terminal on someone's desk, have a connection through the network, and when they log in, they don't know where they're logging into. And that can be one shared system. But I don't see the same synergy when it comes to digging a hole in Caroline Bay. You know.
Councillor Piddington.
Thanks for that, Graham. Look, I'm a bit like a lot of ratepayers. I'm a bit confused because we were sold the efficiencies, getting experts in. You know, the government and DIA basically came and said, everyone get on the bus, and this is going to be great for all of you. But unfortunately, the government who were driving it and DIA, who were the couriers, got off the bus. And since then, every stop we've made, more and more people have got off the bus. So we're left here on our own. So I think the background for it was right, and there are some efficiencies to be gained, but it looks pretty complex when we're just forming it ourselves because the government and DIA have backed off where they started selling this around efficiencies, and they wouldn't like councils to stand alone, but parochialism and other things have kind of got in the way. So still a bit of water to go under the bridge, would you say? I don't know, but some of the points you've made are well made.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it comes down to, I mean, does the DI know more about your water than you do? And of course they don't. It's all very well for them to legislate, and I think probably the legislation that's required in the North Island is probably different to the South Island as well. But I do question the why government, you know, what's the real end game there? And I haven't actually got my finger on that yet, just what they're hoping to achieve from it. But time will tell.
I think if the message is clear. So the previous government was extremely overt, and we were probably the lead council, and thank you for acknowledging that in terms of Three Waters, that we wanted to keep our autonomy and that we wanted to keep our ability to make decisions that affect our district. This government has come in with a mandate that is probably less overt, but now the messages are becoming very clear. They're starting from the top and they're talking about unitaries. They're going to get rid of, they're saying quite overtly, they want to get rid of all the regional councils. The moment they do that, that affects us, I mean, substantially. It's an incredible amount of change. It would involve us and we would be swallowed up. And at that stage, they will take their opportunity to look at all the change that they've projected for a long time in many papers, and we would have unitaries right across the country. And a lot of people might say that that would be a lot more effective. And I think if you look not too hard at the messages that are coming from this government, everything is coming down on us as councils to effect change, and this is just one of the things that they're putting on us now.
Yes, right. I fully understand.
Righty, thanks, Graham. We probably need to end it there. Appreciate you coming and speaking and submitting. Welcome now, Kay Griffiths. Welcome. And this submission's on page 87, team. Floor's yours. Just push the button in front of you, and away you go.
Okay. So, handwritten notes hastily scribbled after midnight. So yes, I suppose, hello, Mayor Bowen and councillors. Our Water Done Well consultation. I suppose the clue's in the title, it's our water. before I read what I've written, the difficulty in finding information hasn't been straightforward. You know, I don't use the council website, so even just navigating that was, you know, a challenge. And then given the list of government departments that aren't involved in these changes would be way shorter than the ones that are, that's a minefield too. You know, the Department of Internal Affairs, Commerce Commission, ooh, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and newly fledged ones as well, as that water company, 2021, and it appears that they're taking on roles that the health department has previously and central government funded, and so I thought it might be reasonably simple, but that's not proven the case. It's incredibly complicated, and as my previous speaker highlighted, what is the end game with this? You know, this is central government essentially making rules that bypass, you know, the elected, you guys as councillors. It seems that that top-down approach isn't actually serving us on the ground here as sort of ratepayers. And yeah, I just don't quite get, given the magnitude of change that they're flagging, that it has to be rushed in the manner that it is. You know, yeah, I'm just unsure on why the timelines are so, yeah, fraught really. So anyway, I'll read what I've managed to hobble together, but I just wanted to note that it hasn't been easy to access the enormous amount of data and understand how we've arrived to where we are now. Yeah, and that's not even starting on the actual legislation and the acts and the amendments to everything that has preceded. Yeah, every other government department jumping on board. So if you do, fantastic. So, in support of my submission to retain all water services in-house, option 1, I'd like to note the following. Firstly, how messy can regulation become? The Three Waters reforms have been in a constant state of flux since 2021, and I suppose before that too. There are so many moving parts to this and an equally huge set of repercussions. It's an understatement to say the complexities are vast, as will be the long-term ramifications of these proposed reforms. Once in a generation, long after all of your terms as councillors have finished. This is so important to get right, and I believe to err on the side of caution must be the only prudent way forward at this time, hence option 1. Then once all the regional council, RMA and other reforms have bedded in, then proceed armed with facts and information to consider then whether joining with neighbouring councils to set up a new water services organisation is the sensible option. I've read much on the proposed cost savings and increased efficiencies, but not much on the additional burden to the ratepayers. I note in Martin Jenkins' Joint Water Services Organisation document, their assumed costs as outlined start at a paltry $9 million to establish, and admittedly it's a one-off cost, but then you put the board, the governance board of directors and their staffing in there. I always think of board of directors, I think South Canterbury Finance and what a minefield that turned into. And then we've followed that up by significant costs for the CFO and the CEO of around 900,000, just shy of $1 million, plus combined with levies from the Commerce Commission in Taumata Arowai, around 460,000. So right out of the gate, we're just to establish, we're $1.5 million plus the $9 million one-off cost. So that's before any hole is dug or any pipe is repaired. All the documents refer to the truncated and rushed legislation and compliant process. Almost everything that you read makes mention of that. Secondly, I'm unclear why the Timaru District Council decided to go ahead with option 3, your preferred option. Well, I sort of do understand, but I think in light of the fact that Waimate had been giving quite clear indications early on that it was going to go alone and keep its services in-house, and Waitaki decided to go with the southern councils or align with them. So option 3, with the imagined efficiencies and assumptions, were workable only with scale, ideally of 3 or more combined councils. But yet, you guys have gone out to the public with your consultation, which I'd have to say is pretty lightweight. There's not a lot of those figures I just mentioned from Martin Jenkins, and I wonder how the public would feel about that option had they been made aware of those costs. So you've gone out so yeah, that's the annual cost, isn't it? Year on year, that $1.5 million. And I just don't see why it precludes your ability in option 1 to do what you've done previously and outsource. I'm sure there's a lot of important facts and figures from CityCare over the time that they were engaged 2013 to 2023 to manage the water services. It seems that you'd probably better understand if they managed all of them or what their role was, but there's some quite accurate figures, I imagine, around their cost of providing that service to you guys. So at an administrative level, again, there's nothing precluding you in option 1 from just having your own arrangement with other councils to do the back office stuff. It doesn't have to be through a framework that the government's sort of, heavy-handed and imposed on the local councils. I might be wrong in that, but I've probably got about another week's worth of reading to better understand that. So yes, and the other thing that why I was waving that around was in option 3, the projection for 2034 was $1,670 annually, while Waimate's equivalent projection for 2034 was $2,225. So I was just a little bit unsure, given that you were probably using the same data, why you both arrived at different amounts for that annual costing. And I just sort of wonder, as affordability was a main concern of most submitters, might that larger cost, and knowing that Waimate and Waitaki weren't actually going to be in option 3, if that would have changed people's submissions. And I'm just equally unclear that I can see Mackenzie, I can see many advantages of Mackenzie District Council partnering with the Timaru District Council, but I think they've got around 5,000 as a population, and we've got the greater area seems to be around 44,000, but not sure how that's reciprocated, given 2 to 3 million tourists travel through Mackenzie annually, and they all use water services over a significantly huge distance. I'm just not sure how that works out in the longer term for us. Plus, we aren't privy to know what proposed developments or subdivisions are planned into the future for the Mackenzie either, and how, I didn't really understand this bit about harmonisation and how that will be impacted over time once that amalgamation takes place after 2028 or whatever that proposal currently stands at. So clearly there, glasses on and off, but you'd want to be a very creative accountant is all I can say, because personally we all try to not have debt, and I think every mortgage holder would be, in seventh heaven if they had no debt. So this idea that somehow debt is a good thing needs to be better explained. Because Yeah. Moreover, this I thought was interesting. Waimate managed to garner 246 submissions from a population of 3,500, while TDC got somewhere around that 140 submissions from a population of 44,000. So I'm pondering why so few submitted on such an important generational issue, and whether it was the consultation with the community, was it rushed or ineffective? But then again, so appears the entire water reform process. And then I've made a couple more points here about, supposing option 3 does become that as an outcome, how do you disengage? How do you exit it, given the complexities of asset ownership once in a corporate utility structure? And I know while it's been laboured at length that it's not a pathway towards privatisation, it actually is. Everything in a tidy little package, and at a stroke of a pen from our good governance in the further north, it can change. And especially if those costs aren't delivered and provide any savings, then that's often the kicker to go, well, the private enterprise can do it more efficiently, or a private partnership arrangement. So while all of that may be viable, it just needs really careful consideration. And as I said, a very good forensic accountant to inform everyone prior to deciding that. And also there's this utilities, this concept of making profits from provision of essential services such as water. And so councils or the WSP water service providers will ultimately be water sellers, and if that's their business, then clearly they'll want to sell more of it. Otherwise, it's not much of a business model. And if you use the electricity utility as an example, they are legally able to recover the full cost of service provision. And in remote areas, they acknowledge delivery of those services may be untenable, hence there's no onus on them to provide it. So that's a concern. We're in the Timona scheme, and I'd have to say that hike of a paltry 57% didn't go down with everyone on that scheme. And so full cost of recovery, does that mean we put tolls up and every tourist coming through our district, we charge them $10 as their pro rata rating for using our water and sewage stormwater systems? It's a really complicated knock-on effect, and you need a more robust discussion, I think, than has been happened already. You're trying to fit into the legislation as you've been guided to do, and I'm just not sure that it's in our best interest. And I think there needs to be some pushback, and I do acknowledge that there has been some from the Timaru District Council in regards to that over Three Waters. So anyway, potentially the outliers that may be generating significant income for the district, they may not be provided with any sort of sensible service because the costs will outweigh costs will outweigh it. Now, there's a wee note here from just on the utilities for electricity. The New Zealand Council of Trade Unions and First Union document by 350 Aotearoa states 300,000 New Zealanders are already living in energy hardship. I think this is 2023, and household bills have increased 42% in 14 years. Well, what you're being tasked to do is become a utility, so I don't see why that wouldn't become true of water in the future as well. Now,
We'll just maybe just a couple of minutes and then save any time for questions because we need to.
Oh yeah, no.
Yeah.
End. But I do note Waimate Mayor's submission on local government bill water services preliminary arrangements. He notes the current fascination with new ways of assessing capitals, such as through public-private partnerships or infrastructure finance and funding arrangements, misses the point that the resultant service fees, tolls or levies are also ultimately met by ratepayers. So basically, they're just saying the people are ultimately the ones who are unable to afford the level of proposed investment. And further, feasibility, he notes, considering the implications of the requirement on councils to explain how they'll ensure the delivery of water services will be financially sustainable by 30th of June 2028. This should include considering precisely what would be needed for that purpose, who the ultimate payers will be, substantially homeowner and ratepayers, to a lesser extent renters, and what evidence exists to demonstrate that burden will be and remain affordable. For this purpose, affordability should be understood as being able to pay rates or water charges whilst also meeting all other normal, non-compulsory essential expenditure such as insurance, heating, healthcare and adequate health food. There is anecdotal evidence that a number of ratepayers are already cutting back significantly in these areas. And then TDC's submission to Water Services Authority, January of this year. While you broadly support the proposal, it was noted that you expressed wider concern that the proposal and accompanying proposed levy for the Commerce Commission are yet another or yet additional examples of unfunded mandates from central government, insofar as historically central government costs and responsibilities funded from general taxation are being assigned to local authorities. The costs will likely need to be passed on to ratepayers. However, the cumulative impact of ongoing unfunded mandates is very consequential and is outlined in a 2024 NZIER research report, a substantial contributor to ongoing rate rises. Well, I'm not sure who wants to vote for those. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions, team? No, or, oh yeah. Yeah, thanks.
I'd quite like to respond to your comment about debt. So right at the moment, we're getting towards the end of the 1930s, 1940s investments in infrastructure. And in that period of time, 1930 through to 1950, there was significant investment in infrastructure, particularly water. How did they pay for it? They borrowed. And they borrowed to higher levels than what we have borrowing right now, if you do it as a percentage of revenue. So what we've got to make sure we do is that we look long-term with water. As humans, we're great at looking short-term, and we think about things in the short-term mode, and we think that because we have to borrow to upgrade the investment, we have to pay for it now. We don't. We've got to spread it over the life of those assets. So that's the biggest thing that we've got to get our heads around is how do you invest, and the only way to invest is to borrow, and then you've got to make sure that you're looking after the level of that borrowing and you can afford to repay the interest and the principal over a very long period of time. You're talking, some assets 50 to 100 years. And that's the sort of stuff we've got to get our head around.
So this is borrowing from the local government funding agency?
Whomever, yeah. And some councils borrow from banks, some councils borrow from the local government financing, so it's whomever is the best entity at the time.
Because I note that even though the advantage of being able to borrow up to 500% if you're in a combined water service providing, I don't know, there were so many little acronyms. One of those, WSCCO or thereabouts. But the point they were making when you read the documents is it doesn't actually preclude you from being able to borrow. So I think it's their preference, but they're not stopping. You know, I know there's stuff I don't understand about CapEx and where you are currently and how that all pans out. But my guess is that they'll still be happy to lend because it's a good bet for them.
So back in the 30s and 40s and 50s, we had the same problem. And they borrowed up to 800%. Those loans did get repaid. You know, you look at this council, a number of years ago, we were pretty well debt-free. We're now in that cycle where you have to borrow up to actually get the infrastructure replaced. That's what we as the community have got to get our heads around.
Yeah, it'd be good to have more detail on what those upgrades or replacement costs or, you know, what facilities are we referring to, because I know a lot's already been done. So that would be useful to understand as well. What are we looking at going forward for those costs? And, you know, how unaffordable are they for us or affordable as the case may be?
So question for you, Andrew. What's the average life of our pipe asset currently?
Currently installed is, I think, just under 50 years, but we've got a significant proportion that's got 5 to 20 years left. We've kind of hit that point where cast iron mains that were put in 100 years ago are at the end of their life. The asbestos cements pipes that were put in the 70s are at the end of their life. Some of the PVC pipes that was put in the 80s is also at the end of their life. So they've all come together at the same time.
So this is around finding a solution for the assets that need to be replaced effectively.
Well, I think with RX Plastic being so handily located, there could be quite a negotiable opportunity there for councils combining in the South Island for provision of the entire piping network, you know.
I know we've talked about shared services a lot today. The reality is councils do not work well together. They should work a lot closer across a lot of these things and get those efficiencies that we talk about, but they just don't. They're all parochial. This is what we're seeing at the moment as far as different councils making different decisions. But for the benefit and affordability of rates, we need to be smarter and work closer together. And this is one of the conversations that we're having now, is how do we work, you know, better together across water. So it's a conversation I think that you know needs to be had. But you know you raised some good points. I think part of this too is that this is only part of the journey. We've got to deliver a water service delivery plan by September, and then these.
You can get an extension, I note.
What's that?
You can get an extension on that.
The reality is people aren't going to get extensions, and if you don't deliver a compliant water service delivery plan, you will be looked at really hard. There will be a lot of councils that will fail and will be told. And this is part of, I think this is part of our, you know, this process is around being able to craft our own destiny as opposed to be put into something that we don't like, which was the last iteration of water reform. So, but you raised some really good points and things that we certainly as councillors have concerns around. There was a question here. Councillor Booth.
Just wondering what you would consider to be a natural catchment area for South Canterbury. What districts do you think that might include?
Yes, well, we're not in the Rangitata electorate, we're in the Waitaki electorate. It's confusing at best, you know, that everything's with
so
the
where does our water
District
come
Council,
from?
but we're not actually represented by, you know.
So what I'm asking is the water catchment area. Do you not?
Just giving you an example of the confusion.
Would you accept that it's probably the Rangitata to the Waitaki and all the inland area, the hinterland in behind that, which takes in Mackenzie, Waimati, and even to a degree Waitaki, because they're a beneficiary of the water that flows down the Waitaki. So therefore, I guess it's only a matter of time before that there's probably a consolidation of the water and the water assets and how those water they are, I guess, maintained and considered. So therefore, here we are now that every single independent council are going to need to have an independent WS water plan plus an audit fee, and they will be required to meet certain new standards which are a lot more stricter than have been in the past. So therefore, that is why we need to consider how we deliver those new requirements to the ratepayer and the person who is connected at the lowest possible cost at the highest quality, highest level of service. So therefore, should we all pay 4 separate fees to the government, 4 separate water services plan, and not get some scale of which, if we were able to, would help mitigate the cost to the ratepayer?
I do understand your point, but I'm saying they've put a framework in place from the central government, but there's nothing precluding you having your own deeds of arrangements and trusts independent of that framework that they're suggesting. And then you can collaborate. I've already noted back office stuff could absolutely be taken care of by combined councils.
I don't think that's an option, because we will be investing in our own water capability, and if anyone else wants to use or coattail onto our capability, they will need to pay commercial rates, because otherwise our ratepayers will be subsidising those other districts who have not actually taken the opportunity, and if they think they're going to be coattailing onto it, Timaru ratepayers, they actually are misinformed.
100%. Well put, Councillor Booth. Any further questions? Was that sort of a question?
Well, I suppose I just think of Europe. There are a lot of shared rivers, and they don't all control what happens downstream. In fact, so just because the headwaters are in the mountains and we're on the coast doesn't necessarily mean that we have control over the river, and all the different zoning committees on rivers are probably a reflection of that as it currently stands. So, I suppose you're really just trying to redefine the boundaries, be it electoral or water-based, for sensible management purposes. But as I said, that's part of the complexity. It's not a standalone thing, water. It actually, by its very nature, interfaces with so many other aspects that need consideration. And perhaps some of, But as I said, I personally think there's a lot of opportunity, as I've heard you say, Nigel. But I just don't know about the timeframes or the structure that you've been given to do it in. That's all. Yeah. And as I said, RX Plastic, they'd just love a big order for the entire pipework for the district.
Yeah, no, there is lots of opportunities for efficiency. Thank you. We really appreciate you submitting. Thanks very much. So, team, what we're going to do now is we're going to go, we've got Fed Farmers, we've got Eleanor and Greg joining us remotely. So we're running a little bit behind, and then we'll go to Lee Burden after that, followed by Matt, and then Jan from the Geraldine Community Board. So we'll go now to online and welcome Eleanor, and I think Greg's there as well. Yeah, welcome to the two of you. And the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks, Nigel, and the councillors there for allowing us to submit on our submission. I might just disappear because I want to read something out, and then Eleanor, probably, who's our senior policy analysis for the South Island, will probably put out some points to you. If I disappear, don't, as long as you can hear me, that's fine.
You're good, mate. Yep.
Yep. So South Canterbury Federated Farmers would like to thank the council for this opportunity to speak to our submission. We've already said that. We recognise that this is a complex process for the council with added time pressure from the government, and that as a district council with many rural and urban ratepayers, the council is looking for the best option for its community now and in the future. South Canterbury Federated Farmers submission raised questions for the council in regard to its preferred option of the CCO. We recognise the Timaru Council has a council with some very savvy business skills to help guide the direction of the district. The complexity of this process seems to be increasing, not decreasing, with the complexity of multiple councils making separate decisions whilst considering community feedback. We have been encouraging councils to apply for extension of time from government for submitting for the final decision. Have councils considered this as an option for more breathing space? Federated Farmers submitted on a few of these processes and have noted that each council is different and has raised different issues in their consultation material reflective of the local community. We would now like to highlight some of the concerns and questions for the CCO model so the council can consider them as it weighs up the best options. And now I'll just hand over to Eleanor to go through those things we need to be considered, please.
Thank you, Greg. I'd just like to thank you to the council for the opportunity to speak. And it was interesting just listening to the previous submitter in terms of the discussion with the council as well, because I feel like some of the questions that we had have been answered in some of that discussion. So I do apologise if I'm sort of repeating some of those things. But a lot of the focus of our submission was basically just questions of that CCO model. So when the council is weighing up what the best options are, we are sort of just looking at it in terms of what the risks are for the ratepayers in the future. So the importance to rural ratepayers is that local oversight and the input into that proposed model for future water services delivery. And so that transparency and local voice is critically important to our farmer members. And so what we do not want to see in that CCO is that dilution of the rural voice. A question for us is how that local governance with other councils will be managed in that CCO model. So with an independent board and chair, there will be that increased need for expertise with expertise in rural water schemes and rural issues. The other aspects that we were thinking about was the very complexity of that governance structure under a CCO. So the model, and this is from a public perception, is potentially less transparent and harder for the community to have its say. So, and that's sort of like, for example, via consultation. So with that future model of the CCO, with multiple councils, how would that work? Because we know from a council like yourselves where you've got your own sort of independent structures as well, how that would work, but we're just not sure where you've got multiple councils, how that structure would work. One of the other points is that farmers do pay significant rates, and while not all farmers are connected to reticulated water supply, these decisions go to the heart of financial stability of council. We recognise that the decision for a CCO is complex and there is pressure, but there's always risk of things going wrong, e.g. interest rates go up, or there's issues with other councils or changes in government policy. We'd just like council to look carefully at this and future-proof as much as possible. Protect yourself and the community you represent from future risk and change, and take your community with you on this process, because we do recognise that this is going to be a long game. The CCO model itself also introduces the potential of freeing up financial headroom for the council if assets and liabilities are shifted across to the CCO. What farmer ratepayers would be concerned about if then the council advance other priorities that potentially increase the rates for farmers. We also recognise that other council decisions to be included or not will change the structure of the CEO and the shareholding agreement and everything that flows on from that and the impacts of the projected modelling. Hence our suggestion for that extension just might help with a bit of time with projected changes, but I think the previous discussion had already talked on that point. another point that we had thought about with this is that whole cost being kept within a district, and that ratepayers within a district are not going to be burdened with the costs from another district. And I think this was covered in the previous discussion as well, that we would like that there is a level of certainty that that risk won't be changed in the future. Like, that is not going to be something that is going to change in terms of any agreement with other councils. And I guess as a final point, that local voice and representation is critical for our rural communities. That shareholder agreement needs to be clear in how the rural ratepayers of the Timaru district are looked after. And as a council, you're looking to the future and what the community representation looks like and what the best scenarios is for that rural community. So thank you very much for your time, and we appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today.
Thanks, Eleanor, and thanks, Greg. And I think a lot of what your concerns you've identified there will be dealt with within shareholders' agreement, and that's because we haven't made decisions and don't have partners having those cross-party discussions yet. That's some of the stuff that's in the future. But I think though all of those concerns that you have are our concerns as well. And one point on harmonisation, I haven't met any councillor, any council that wants to pay for someone else's water assets at all. So I think that's going to be a very key part of shareholders' agreements around protection, out into the future for harmonisation of costs. Interesting enough, though, I think the modelling that we did over the 10-year period with those 4 councils, the costs end up being very, very similar over that period of time. They end up coming very much within COE. So, but all of those councils certainly need significant investment as well, and so that's the opportunity of that debt that you talk about. But I think that's a real concern, not just for rural ratepayers. Your point around debt, it frees up councils, and future councils, and that's the challenge. How do you have that conservatism when you've got a big load of debt out here on infrastructure and you've got freed up headroom within a council? So I think that's a risk that we won't necessarily solve through this, but I think that's something that communities are going to have to hold democracy to account on. So that debt burden doesn't grow to one side. So it's a really relevant point, but I don't think we can put the protections on that within this. Yeah. Is there any questions for Eleanor?
So just before you move on, Nigel.
Go, Greg. Yep.
Just another point around that harmonisation. So it's interesting, most of the discussions around water, but I do believe this is water, sewage and stormwater. My concern from like a farmer's perspective or a rural, and I'm not, I pay a water rate here up in Mackenzie because I belong to a rural scheme which is administered by the council. So I have real concerns how you're going to have your shareholder agreement getting around the fact that you're going to have a reasonable amount of overhead because of the cost, the $9 million was quoted, or $10 million was quoted in your financials about setting the organisation up. So that overhead is going to be spread across, the entity, and then you've got your ongoing charges of management and that. I struggle to see how you're going to have a shareholders agreement that's going to separate that from the three services, and not just, because a lot of the rural ratepayers are only concerned with water, they're not concerned with sewage and stormwater unless they come to town. So that's one of the concerns I think it's going to be really addressed in your shareholder agreement.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I think that just has to be articulated well as far as where the costs are absorbed, across the 3 or 4, whatever councils. Yeah, I'll get Nige to speak to that as well.
So whether water services are delivered in-house or with a CCO, you in both situations you have an overhead allocation model, and that overhead allocation model needs to be quite robust. And it needs to actually ensure that it's equitable for those 3 different types of water if the 3 types went to a CCO. So you can't avoid that anyway. You've got to have that allocation model. I think price harmonisation is interesting because it's talked about at the highest level, But even within Timaru, we don't have price harmonisation. We have different prices for different types of water services, and I can't see that changing too quickly. So while the overall looks similar, it's just like rates. You know, you have your average rate, so you have your average water delivery charge, but sitting under that is quite different rates for different types of water delivery because of the infrastructure required for each different type.
Any
I
further?
guess it's sort of on its face, the phrase price harmonisation does strike a little bit of terror when you hear it, just the way it's, just the wording of it. So it is, the devil will be in the detail and how it all works out. And I think it is, from what we've seen from other councils, they're sort of recognising that this is going to be, it's a long and complicated process, and we definitely recognise that. And I think, you know, the main point from our submission is just that thinking about all of those risks and looking at that longer term game, which it does sound like that you are doing in terms of protecting the community. And from our point of view, it's that the risk for the rural community and the rural ratepayers.
I agree. You can't compare a downland scheme to the urban scheme. The charge for each of those are very different, even now. And I don't see that changing very quickly, or if at all.
Yeah, sorry, Greg, you had a comment?
And just that one other point, you know, I was listening when we were waiting to come online to the discussion around the debt. And I mean, I understand debt from a farm perspective, you can't do anything without debt, but it always worries me when you don't hear councils talking about other options. There's more than one way to skin a cat. You know, we've been guilty of not funding depreciation at times. Yeah. You know, there's ways of cutting costs. You know, it's not always just debt, and I think the council has got to remember that.
We talk about that all the time.
Good. Please.
And particularly, you know, depreciation. This council isn't funding all of its depreciation, and we talk about that just about every single meeting. And we're working hard to get it to that point. And you're right, it's really important to keep those two things in balance. So you are covering your depreciation to put money away for the future investment or to repay your debt.
And saying that we are funding a lot more than a lot of councils as well, so it's, yeah. But no, really good point. Sorry, questions? Go Councillor Booth and then I'll go Councillor Booth, then Councillor Scott.
Yeah, hi, Greg Allen Booth here. Do you believe that your existing organisation has the capability to deliver what's required to meet the new regulatory environment that you're going to have to do? Do you believe that they're organised and have the resources and are capable of doing that?
Well, I'd hope so. I'd hope you've got enough faith in the people you employ to run an organisation like that. Whatever way it goes, you know, I find it amusing when I hear this argument. You either got to have faith in your organisation or your people you employ to do these jobs, or you know, get out of it, or you know, we just shouldn't have councils at all.
Are you referring to us, or are you referring just generally?
Yeah, I
wasn't referring to rural schemes.
Oh, for the rural schemes.
Oh, the rural schemes.
Ah, okay.
And you know, there's a different. You know what you're all.
Sorry, I thought you meant running the organisation, your CCO or your in-house.
No. Well, you're opposing, by the sound of it, and wanting to retain local oversight, in which you would still retain. But what I'm asking is, do you believe that that your current council and not entering and taking some form of action are capable to meet the new water standards and regulations that will be brought upon them, and plus paying all the fees that are associated with that to ensure that you guys are going to jump through the hoops and do what's required?
Yeah, I personally do. I mean, I think it's always been difficult delivering water to, you know, there's always rules have improved over time, but I do. I certainly do. Yep.
Thank you. Councillor Scott.
Thank you. My questions are directed to Ms Lynn Scott. In your submission, you said bigger isn't necessarily better. I just wondered how you would suggest rural needs are addressed if a joint CCO goes ahead.
I think one of the things I have to say in this process that we wrote the submission and then it's a very complicated process. And I think what we were talking about today in terms of the questions that we've put forward to the council is basically recognising that this is actually a very complicated process, and the council was making a decision based on looking at a multitude of factors. And so what we are saying is basically that there is a lot at stake here, and we recognise it's complicated, and it's basically that we are looking to the council to consider all those factors and consider the risks and make sure that all that is factored in. So that's probably what I can say there. Like in terms of like we've said here, in terms of like the council was very informed. The council's over a lot of the detail and has been looking at this for a long time. And so we are looking at it from the viewpoint of from the farmer ratepayer point of view, in terms of what are the pros and cons and where does that take us? Where does it end up?
That's a good lead into my final question, and that is, would you support ring fencing rural scheme assets and reserves within a larger entity?
That's a quick, Greg. What's your...
Yeah, that'll be interesting because, like you said, some rural schemes in a larger entity have got, well, some rural schemes that I know of, have got reserves and they're pretty well run scheme. They've got voluntary input put into it. I look at the Albury scheme up in Mackenzie district. You'd have a hell of a battle getting that off them. So, but I mean, if it could be ring fenced and we could, the consumers were honestly believe they were getting a fair deal, there may be. It's going to be difficult.
Where those schemes have got their own governance structures and in place already, like I guess that was one of our original questions, is how that would work in the new model in terms of that transferring that skill set and that knowledge into the CCO, especially when you're looking at a CCO that has got multiple councils involved. And it's complicated. Like there's a lot to unpick and think about. So, yeah.
We've got a Downlands which is across the three councils now, which is managed by Timaru on behalf of the three, and it does run really well, I believe, and all of our rural schemes are ring-fenced now in that regard, so it's easy enough to do. But any other questions from councillors on this side? But appreciate both Eleanor and Greg, you making the time today, and you've raised some really good sort of questions and things that we have been considering as well on what would look like within shareholders agreements and rural voice, other things such as that. So yeah, really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, guys. Have a good day.
Cheers. Thanks. Alrighty, apologies for running over time, but I just think it's there's not a whole lot of submitters overall, and it's just good to give people the time to have a chat. So we'll now come to Lee. So welcome, Lee Burden. And Lee's submission is on page 35. Welcome, Lee. Floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Your Worship, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to the Council. The Council has debated the strategies surrounding the control of water and water service types to the users of the district. And the current proposals, I'd have to say, are certainly much better than the Three Water proposal that left this community with no say at all on the control and delivery of the assets they've paid for. This one, just in line with some of those last comments, I see consultation opened on the 15th of May. closed on the 6th of June, and now we're in middle of July. It didn't give the ratepayers that time to get a head round it thing. So I'm actually really disappointed with such an important issue that the number of people that have put submissions in. It just shows me that we're not engaged. The current proposals are certainly much better. My concern is the amount of say the community would have with the preferred option of council. Previous experience has shown how smaller communities dominated by a larger population area has little or no voice in the delivery of services by the council. This will lead to a loss of local control and influence, and I guess the regional council is a prime example of that. For example, smaller communities, I sometimes wonder if anyone from Timaru visits wider Geraldine area to see the state of some of our roads and the lack of maintenance in some of the council-owned buildings. With a greater number of councils participating in a larger governance body, I would see that smaller areas would have an even smaller voice. The council fought a battle to stop the Three Waters plan. Surely this preferred option of yours is another form of the same principle. I have also serious concerns on the makeup of the appointed directors. How will this be done? What will be the makeup of the board? Excuse me if I say I have little confidence in the current system used by the council for appointments. Timaru District Holdings is a council-owned company that is now controlled by external directors that have now seemed unaccountable to the ratepayers of the district. They've changed the original intent of that company from an advisory board comprising 3 council members and 2 external directors to monitor the council's investments in Alpine Energy and Port of Timaru. That now seems to be a vehicle for property development, and what little information we, the ratepayers as owners of the company, get, not very successful. I can remember being told how a city holding company was a great way to do things as a council when I was on it, without having to go to the ratepayers. I was so proud that Timaru District Holdings was not like that. I couldn't say that now. I would need to know how the makeup of any board would be made before I would feel confident on either option 2 or 3. I'm very disappointed in the number of submissions council has received, and it reinforces my belief that the council has little connection with the ratepayers. This is a very important decision the council is making and deserves to have much more public discussion before a decision is made. You will only get one chance to get it right. Spend some more time and do the consultation well. Remember, democracy and localism do matter to the people you represent.
Awesome, thanks, Lee. Questions for Lee? Yeah, Councillor Pye.
Thank you, Lee. I'm really keen to understand from you how we can do consultation better, because we can't round people up and force them to a meeting. So how do we do this better? Because I agree, it's very disappointing.
Well, I have to say, we have a website. Sorry, you have a website and you expect everybody to go and look at the website, but a lot of people don't. There's so many getting other things on their computers, from their friends emailing them or going on Facebook and everything else. And some people just aren't comfortable using that process. And I know it's difficult because you put things in the Timaru Herald. Well, to a lot of people, that's a waste of time. Sometimes around Geraldine, I think you'd get a better response if you put it in the Otago Daily. So, I think I do understand your problems. The Courier is a far better vehicle because at least every household gets it, but we also have the little community papers. But maybe you should be putting it on local websites, local Facebook page, like Geraldine has a buy-sell, whatever it is, buy-sell exchange, whatever they call it. We have that, and most people look at that because if somebody finds a cat that's, they don't know who it belongs to, and that, it all goes on there. So everything goes on there, and maybe you should be looking at that sort of vehicle. I have to say I've been really disappointed in the communications coming out of the Timaru District Council for quite a few years.
So we did all of that. We used the Courier. I know personally as a councillor I shared it on my local Facebook page, and so we've done that and we still get no response.
Well, maybe it's just part of the general apathy people have towards the council. And so what are you going to do about that? because that's your responsibility. You've made people apathetic because we used to get lots of submissions. So I don't know how you can improve it to make sure, but at least let the people know that you are listening to them would be a start.
Councillor Burt.
I know this is a chance to ask questions, but, you know, like I've been on here 12 years, this is my 4th term, and I can tell you that nothing has changed. We want to be connected to our community, but the culture has changed so much. There are lots of keyboard warriors out there who will have plenty to say, but the average person is so concentrated on their life and getting across, you know, everything from, you know, obviously the cost of living and all those sorts of things. They understand that there is this situation happening, but their life's too busy to actually give it any time or consideration. We have voted on this council hopefully for the purpose of what is for the best for our community, and therefore we must make those decisions. We had to come up with a result, a best plan and what have you. As Councillor Pai have said, we use every opportunity to go to our community to get consultation, and yes, you hit the nail on the head. There is an apathy towards local councils, but we're hoping that most of it is designed around the fact that they have trust in us to know and understand that we have all the information, and central government, as you know, is pushing this stuff onto us. And you said, we more than anyone know about localism. We know about local democracy, and we want to protect it at every cost. We were the council that led it under the last government. Central government does not trust local government. So they want to put things in place so that they can have some control. Unfortunately, we only have so many mechanisms to push back on that. Obviously, and it was alluded to earlier by Councillor Piddington, that the bus came down the road with all these things saying you will not be in a position to do it on your own, and we'll make sure you don't. Well, we want to see the consequences from central government for those who now are going on their own. Because, you know, like I think there's a change of views on this council based on that. But I do take exception to the fact that we are not using every mechanism at our disposal to try and communicate and connect with our community.
In reply to that, I've never seen anything from the council on the Geraldine website, things. I know what you mean. I think there was an ex-mayor from north of Wellington said the 1989 change of legislation has destroyed the confidence in local government to some extent, because actually the voice of councillors lost their voice. Control went to the staff. And I think that's probably part of the problem for the whole country. That a lot of this has been driven by, I think, a lot of civil servants that sat in Wellington and had to justify their jobs. I'm not sure what they're doing, because the whole water thing, but there is one or two, and I know the Timona scheme. Quite frankly, I think they would have been better individually to put those ultraviolet things in their own home and put a new rod in every year to make sure it was right. Would be cheaper than what they're paying in rates. You know, you've got to look at other options for some of those small water schemes. But yeah, I think you need to. Some of the things that have gone on, I'd have to say in the last few years, I just got apathetic about doing anything, and then I decided again. I've always said, don't complain until you're prepared to do something. So then I thought, well, I will put some submission in, because it is such an important issue. But I think going into a large thing controlled out of Canterbury wide will be to the detriment. I mean, Geraldine will have no say whatsoever. I mean, when we had raw sewage coming up in stormwater events and properties at the lower end of Geraldine, it took a long time, many, many years, before that was dealt with. And actually that to me is unacceptable, you know, to have that sort of stuff and people coming up in people's front lawns and in their homes. I mean, that's just wrong. And so they think everything is detailed and sorry, you've had so much publicity lately, and all your publicity has been about the Theatre Royal, until quite frankly everybody's sick to death of hearing about it, and they're still not happy. And then I'd like you to remember something I heard on the radio today. The people of Auckland are really peeved off about the super city. A lot of people are peeved off because in actual fact, they have no local voice anymore anywhere. And so then it's all dealt with and controlled by the staff, giving the advice to the councillors, and then you're dependent on how smart the councillors are to ask the right questions.
And you know we have absolutely no control over our media, and they want to print stories that grow legs, and so they dictate to the public what is actually important, and they will generally take the negative connotation on it, and therefore the theatre has gained a lot of traction because it gets readership. We have no control over that, and you're right, those decisions should be made.
Right, I'm going to move us back to water.
Yeah.
Because
Thank
no one
you.
wants
Do
to
you,
talk
do you have
about
a question?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, perfect. That would be great.
Firstly, I want to thank you very much, Ms Burden, for your submission and your passion for Geraldine. And I do care deeply for Geraldine too, and I hope that that comes across, because otherwise Councillor Oliver will probably kill me in the lounge. But my question to you is, I really want to flesh out a little bit about what local control means to you, and what would help you feel confident that your community's voice will still matter under a new structure?
The community be listened to. I mean, we struggle now sometimes to think, does this council listen to us? So therefore, once it goes to Christchurch, you can forget it. I mean, look at now at the regional council complex, you know, with one voice, and it's going to be, and everything, and it's just normal, isn't it? It's going to be dictated to by the population. So this district's views in Christchurch would always be what Timaru City, more what Timaru City wants rather than what the others want. And you know, and I said at the meeting that they had at Geraldine, that, you know, I look at, you want to merge with who you want to merge with, Waitaki, but that didn't work too well with Alpine Energy merging with Waitaki, and then Waimate wants to do their own thing, so you're left with Mackenzie, and as I said, Ashburton probably won't want to because they're as parochial as Timaru. So, you know, and things, and you know, but Ashburton's pretty good because I was born there. So, but you know, yeah, it's just no voice. You know, you literally feel, and what I said before, I'm sorry about the building maintenance and about the roads. I went to a road the other day, and I drove up it, and I had to dodge the potholes. And in the end, I couldn't dodge the potholes. There were so many of them, you couldn't actually weave your way around them. And you end up with people driving on the grass verge because that's actually smoother than going on the road. And I've got buildings and, you know, gutters and the pensioner cottages with things this high growing in the gutters. I mean, to me, that's not acceptable maintenance.
Anything on this side? Thanks, Lee. I think a really good point around the community influence, though, so we need to really think that through. So thanks for your time. Alrighty, welcome now Matt Savage. Thanks, Matt, and apologies for the delay. Welcome, and the floor is yours, and Matt's submission is on page 218.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll take my submission as read and just speak to the key points. So I am in a slightly unique position with regards to this topic in that, so I'm Dr Matt Savage. I am a water industry professional. I run a water infrastructure business out of Timaru, or have historically run, don't anymore. I've spent the last 20 years trying to attract water professionals to Timaru and young engineers, and it's hard yakka, as I'm sure the council can appreciate. One of my key concerns with the proposals is achieving critical mass and achieving economies of scale. It's very hard. We were able to do that as a business by going national, and by going from trying to attract people to Timaru to national, we went from 12 staff to 65. Council obviously can't do that. They've got to look at other ways of achieving economies of scale, and I think the preferred option is how that can be achieved. I also stand in a slightly unique position that for the last 9 years I've been a director of a water industry CCO, not associated with the Timaru District Council. And I do believe the CCO method is an appropriate way of approaching the governance requirements, the financial oversight requirements of the CCO, the Te Mata Arawai requirements of the CCO. It is a good way of going forward and achieving that critical mass. With the current structure and the current proposed amalgamations, I do have some concerns if we don't go down the CCO path. The DIA may have views on that. If Waimate, Mackenzie and Timaru all said, we're going alone, I do fear that that may take the decision out of our hands, and the DIA will come and go, come on guys, no, that's not the point. So I think achieving that critical mass, and even Timaru, Mackenzie, Waimate, if it was possible to make happen, obviously everyone has their own say, is still quite small, but I mean, it's what's available to us. It's not just our decision. So those are my key regards: achieving critical mass, being able to attract the skills we need to actually achieve what we need to do in the water industry in Timaru, and having it managed well. Cheers.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Appreciate that. Councillor Piddington.
With your experience, Matt, how many councils do you think, or what's the number of people we need to make it efficient in your world?
My view on that would be contentious in Timaru. I visited Scotland and reviewed the Scottish water infrastructure as part of the previous reform, and I viewed, in Scotland, the small communities benefit massively from the large cities. And all the small regions have very, very high level of water treatment, very, very high level of servicing, and everyone in Edinburgh pays for it. So I see the bigger the better. Obviously, retaining local control is what the local community wants, so that's important. So within the local control being achieved, then the bigger the better. Waitaki would be fantastic, but of course they've chosen a different direction.
And just following on from that, Matt, you know, there's certain parochialism coming out throughout this, and you are on a CCO, so how do you recommend we get people into the room, back on the bus?
Yeah, I'm in a commercial CCO, so it is different to a council-facing and public-facing CCO, so we build the wastewater treatment plants, water treatment plants, etc. So we don't have a lot of facing. I do absolutely acknowledge the previous submitter's comment around engagement. I'm aware of what the turnout was to the council's roadshow evenings, and one hand would probably cover most of the people that turned up. And it's just really hard to get people, as you say, out of their private life and into public engagement. Certain people want to, I mean, I'm on multiple boards and governance boards and things and want to give back, but yeah, to get people out of their day-to-day life, it's a struggle for a lot of people, and engagement is difficult.
And just for interest, our previous position against the larger Scotland-type model was largely around the questions that we couldn't get answered at the time. And I remember saying to Grant Robertson, can we guarantee that Washdyke into the future is going to get the investment it needs? As we're aware, half of Timaru Urban's water goes to Washdyke, and it supports that manufacturing, and we couldn't get any of those. Our preferred model back then was actually to work across the 5 councils, and it's probably disappointing for us that the likes of Ashburton didn't come on board. But some of those conversations are still going. Yes, Waitaki have made a decision. It's a decision that's going to buy them some time, I think, because I don't think councillors were supportive of the Southern Water model. They're actually still of the view that they should be considering a joint model. So although some of these decisions have been made, I think they're not going to be final decisions, and I think you're right as far as DIA. I share the same view as far as where we all end up. It'll be interesting. We've got conference this week, so it'll be interesting to get their view from that. Further questions for me?
Can I just back up the Mayor? Waitaki made a decision to stay in-house for 2 years and also to engage with South Canterbury.
Excellent.
So their decision is, I back up the Mayor, it's more a holding pattern to try and give them some time to actually come to a final decision.
Yeah, I can only encourage the council to really put some elbow grease into that, and the more you can join together, the better you're going to be able to attract the skills and expertise you need to execute this well.
And I appreciate that. Those conversations are ongoing. So thanks, Matt. We really appreciate that, and great to hear from your skill set and industry knowledge. So thank you for taking the time.
Thank you.
So it's being on 2 hours, team. I just have to move a resolution just so we continue that council suspends standing order 4.2 to allow the to continue beyond 2 hours. I'll move that from the chair. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Pye. Any discussion? Put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Go now to Jan. Welcome, Jan. Thank you for attending. And then do we have David here? Team? Oh, yep, perfect. Yep. Welcome, Jan. Floor's yours. Sorry, 57 for submission. Thanks, team.
Thanks, everybody, and good morning, everyone. I should say that the Geraldine Community Board and our community at large watched on with some admiration as the Timaru District Council opposed Central Government's Three Waters proposals. Our community was bristling with signage, and some of them remain to this day. Our submission has two parts. The first raises a high-level and I think pretty important procedural matter, and the rest is content-related. As far as the procedural matter goes, I wouldn't say that it's a showstopper, but it is a please pause and appropriately change the consultation issue. So we've got Section 82 of the Local Government Act saying that people should have relevant information, and the board's feeling is that they don't. A lot of people won't know what CCOs are and that they're provided under legislation, what the legislation is, what it says and how to find it. This stuff is really important. So a council decision made after this meeting without providing all of that information could be a vulnerable decision. It's worth considering that. So our recommendation on that is to please give more time and more information to your communities. Onto the content-related bits, all under subheadings. The first one, I apologise for any material traversed by others here. I think we have a slightly different take on it though, so let's go. The first one is what makes a good board member of a CCO, because the documentation hasn't said. Ratepayers need to have a say on this, but it does need to be informed by the information they've been given. I've raised in particular tikanga, which is provided in the appropriate bit of the Local Government Act, because it may be considered desirable, but we don't know from the consultation document whether you'd consider that desirable. And I've raised it also because there are a few cautionary tales here, not specifically related to CCOs, but relevant regardless. And one of them would be the Christchurch City Council's Akaroa project, which has been in part driven by Ngāi Tahu. It's expensive and it's scientifically questionable and discharge to land project. The other one I would raise right now is a bit closer to home, and that's Mid and South Canterbury's Runaka objection to Three Waters. This is under the Canterbury Water Management Strategy, which is again scientifically questionable. It's dubious with respect to local history and reasonably recent history. It's stalled a lot of the work and it's been very expensive. So a recommendation on this, just to zoom back out to what makes a good board member, please say what you want in a board member, just so that the public can comment. Accountability is the next subheading, and there are some positives, I would say, in the Local Government Act with respect to CCO accountability, but they don't match the downsides of CCO distance from voters, which is I've heard raised here today several times, especially if another council is involved. So our recommendation here was to just please note our concern about this. It's a serious concern. On financial costs, our next subheading, the options given model only the costs. That's worrying to us. So our recommendation is to please provide the public with costs of comparative setup, governance, employment, and that's with respect to everybody from technical, managerial, right down to the tea lady, planning, audit, and any other costs associated. Our next subheading was what the council termed seamless integration in its consultation document. And the TDC makes decisions about some decisions on vegetation in our catchments. And this is intrinsically linked to water sequestration and volume and water filtration, that's quality, and flow. So our recommendation here is that keeping water services delivery in-house would be best for that seamless integration that you say you find desirable, and a second one would be the second option. Option 2 would keep it close. Option 3 just wouldn't allow that seamless integration. The Treaty of Waitangi. If a CCO model is adopted, there's more than just the potential for tikanga to make things tricky with respect to board membership. There's also that the TDC stated Ilona Treaty of Waitangi commitments, whatever they are, but haven't actually said what they are. And this is in the consultation document. The other thing is the Local Government Act, Section 60A, which is about culture and traditions. So our recommendation here is to please let ratepayers know what all of this means and what it could cost in terms of time, what it could cost in terms of money, and what it could cost in relation to what the public expects of a fact-driven organisation such as its council. Our next subheading was the change between now and the future. And I know this has been traversed before, but our recommendation here is that if a district in a multi-district CCO has a big change happening, and whether that's with respect to, say, natural disaster or big population increases or decreases or an industry, what then for the other councils? So our ratepayers need to know about that before they can comment with any authority on what's proposed. Our next subheading was risk management, and this is related to past experiences of CCOs, or with CCOs. So what if a council pays too little attention to investments made by its CCO, or if a council doesn't pay enough attention to a statement of intent produced by a CCO? So our recommendation on this is to please state what mechanisms would be in place to prevent that lack of attention or to mitigate. Our last subheading was withdrawal. What would it cost to withdraw from a multi-council CCO, and what would it cost to wrap up a locally owned CCO, and then what would it cost to re-establish local water services delivery? The recommendation there was to please advise. So to wrap this up, I should say that the Geraldine Community Board isn't necessarily opposed to a CCO model, but more information is needed both for our community and the wider Timaru district to comment with any authority on the options. So for now, the Geraldine Community Board's recommendation is to go with option 1. Any questions?
Questions for Jan team? Yeah, Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Jen. Appreciate the submission from the Geraldine Community Board. You note that CCOs pose risk of underperformance and lack of oversight in your submission, which you actually sort of haven't talked about verbally today. But are these not equally risks for in-house delivery, especially given staff, sort of industry shortages, funding constraints, and regulatory pressure?
I'd say they're different kinds of risks. So, if you're doing in-house delivery, you're talking about a thing that is run by the people, our community elects. So every 3 years, there's a very stern appraisal of that issue, plus the others that are going on. Of course, the risks are different with a CCO. We just have to, there's qualitative and quantitative risk, I think. So it's over to you folk to balance what that means for your decision making.
Further questions, team? No? That's cool. Thank you, Jan. Appreciate that.
Thanks.
Now we've got David. Is David here? Yep. Welcome, David. And David's submission is on page 51. Welcome, David. Floor's yours.
Good morning, Your Worship, councillors, ladies and gentlemen. David Diamond is my name. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to these options as printed in the paper. Option 3, I'm going to start with, is, in my view, and from a ratepayer view, disastrous because of the cost involved, and combining several councils and their requirements together, the details are, insurmountable. Also, the way it's all written out here, it's got a sort of a Wellington look about it, and it's sort of like psychobabble. There's a lot of words that don't draw conclusions, lots of red herrings, unsatisfactory, in my view. Option 2, this is adding a couple of layers of bureaucracy to what we already have in option 1. Right from the beginning, from the time they dug the first well, our borough councillors and our successive councils right up to this day, we've been right on top of the water infrastructure. So far as the drinking water is concerned. It talks about costing. For option 2, you have to set up a separate organisation with its attendant costs, all impinging on the ratepayer. What we have at the moment is working very well, has done right from the time they dug the first well and bricked it up and built the big reservoirs at Claremont, the early ones, and then what we have now. And we have some of the best by vote water in New Zealand. Why try to fix something that's not broken? Wastewater, of course, that's cost at its source. So as far as the ratepayer is concerned, it should be self-sufficient. Limited opportunities for efficiencies. It's meaningless. Woke talk, psychobabble. Council needs to keep all water services under local control. Local solutions for local problems. They're elected to make decisions, they have all the information in-house, no thought given to the status quo in these options, which has served us well, with modifications to meet the situations over the years. That's all I have to say, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much.
Thanks, David. Appreciate you taking the time to submit and come and present to us. Any questions for David?
I beg your pardon?
Oh, no, just asking the team if there's any questions. Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Diamond, and we really appreciate you coming to talk to your submission today, so thank you for that. You talk about the current system works well, and I agree with you, but can you tell us what you value most about how our water is managed now?
I turn the tap on. I have potable water. That's what all the ratepayers want, and they deserve that, and the councils have served them well in this regard. As for government interference, further government interference, do we have to build a distillery next? Our water's not going to kill us by drinking it now. So, yes.
Thanks, David. Hey, while you're here, what's your views on water metering?
Water?
Metering. So the metering of water to add value to exactly what that commodity is.
It may well come to that in the future, but we do waste a lot of water.
We do. And that's treated water, highly treated water. Thank you.
Anything over this side, team? No, all good. Alrighty, thank you, Mr. Diamond. Appreciate you submitting to us.
Thank you for the opportunity, Your Worship.
No worries at all. Now, would you like to just, can we just kill the screen? Mrs. Griffiths just wanted to speak to us on a point of order. Thank you.
But wait,
Go
there's
for it.
more. This is just speaking to the point about community engagement. This document, when I went into our local service centre at the library, well, it wasn't anywhere on display. The person had to look under the shelf and it wasn't there, so they had to ask a colleague where they might locate it. And it seemed pretty obvious to me, while the submission's in process, why not have a display about it at the local library centres?
Thank you for that very good point.
Yeah, go.
We did have we had a session at the library one afternoon at 6 o'clock. That was pretty well. Lee was there. We only had 2 people turn up. We had all the water guys there, plus myself and community board chair, and that could have come and asked plenty of questions. So I'm not too sure if you saw that or not, but there was definitely an opportunity there to come and listen to those guys.
Yeah, and I think people are already committed many nights of the week.
Yes,
and so it just doesn't always stack up that it's possible to attend.
I believe we had displays at the other library, so we'll just check that, because we normally would for any consultation that normally.
Yeah, well, it makes sense, doesn't it? It's an easy opportunity to have eyes on it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No
and
worries.
just speaking to the water meters, there's quite a fiasco going on at the moment with Auckland's water meters, faulty ones mainly. That's, you dig them up and there's a cost to that to put them in, and they only have a certain life expectancy, but when they don't work, there was something like 4,000 faulty meters that they're having to replace. So you want to make sure you get the right meters for, for that task. Okay, thank
No worries,
you.
Thank you. Alrighty, team, we're going to adjourn and then we'll come back in 15 minutes just to deal with the paper. Thank you. And those that have submitted in the audience, the next paper is just around receiving and notes, so we'll come back and do that in about 15 minutes. There might be a very light discussion, but we're not making any decisions today, so we're making decisions next Tuesday. Thank you, so we'll just adjourn now. Alrighty, Council, welcome back. So I'll take you now to page 6 of the Council agenda, and so that is the report on local water done well consultation. So we'll go to the recommendations. Again, we're not making a decision today. So 1 is receives and notes the written submissions. 2 acknowledges any submitters who have spoken, so we do acknowledge and appreciate all those that have taken the time today. 3 notes that all submissions will be considered as part of the deliberations, which is next week, and 4 identify any particular topics or themes. So perhaps, and seek advice. So perhaps we dive to 4. Is there anything that we need to say to the officers that we want to explore more specifically? There has been lots of conversations, obviously, offline as well, as far as what we want to see next week. I guess probably the big one is Mackenzie's just gone in-house for the time being. So, we've had, that's just happened this morning, 3-2. I think there was a couple conflicted, and obviously the Mayor is on sick leave as well, so under other circumstances it might have gone the other way, but can't do anything more on that one. Councillor Piddington.
I guess just moving to a CCO, and I don't really know what I'm asking, but
that's right.
If we're a CCO of ourselves, I want to be clear what the advantages are, because there's quite big establishment costs. And while I was totally for it when we joined, I just need some clarity what the advantages are going forward of being a CCO just of ourselves.
I think that the establishment costs of a CCO of ourselves will be a lot less, because you can transfer the staff across and also set it up, but they can live in this building, they can use our back office functions, so the setup costs will be significantly less. It's more about getting the constitution right and getting the documents right. That's my opinion.
I think you could.
The advantage would be that you then have a vehicle that, if in the future neighbouring councils decided to join, it's there. They can join. So that's to me the 2 advantages.
So
and also the governance. You would have a change of governance.
So there could
and the 3rd one is you open yourself up for the 500% of revenue for borrowing.
Yeah, thanks. But I think that's what we need to be clear when we're selling this. In the paper, those points have to be taken into account. And I just wonder how a constitution works when we do it all for ourselves and then someone joins. Does it get,
Well, I think that's the opportunity, and I'm tomorrow, a couple of us at a conference, and we're teeing up a time to meet with DIA and some of our friends from down south at Waitaki. And so I think there's genuinely some of these other partners are still open to those conversations. It's how we set ourselves up, and we've talked about and run past DIA allowing the other councils to have a shareholding, a share in our water entity, and also I think we can still have those conversations, because I think genuinely before mid-27 others will be wanting to be in this. I think the next 6 months is probably going to be quite telling, but how do we still work together with them so actually they have some influence on what that organisation should look like as well? I think that's being nice and open and transparent, but we're also in a good seat in the fact that we get to shape what others are probably going to end up being a part of. So, but I think let's get all the questions out there so we can have a good paper in front of us next week for considerations. And I think even during this week, with some of the conversations at conference with DIA, they're probably going to influence some pathways, and we'll debrief with Mackenzie as well
Yeah, so the distinction we need to understand is others are wanting or others are requiring to. That's what we need to know. It's been mentioned here, earlier today, when you go to conference, DIA needs to stand up and go, I'm sorry, but we are going to come at you with the big stick. We're in the best position now because we made every move we could. We took every advantage we could to say we understand the process and we want to engage, and now we've been left on our own. So I think, a holding point for us now might be the best thing based on what Mackenzie and Waitaki are doing. That's just putting it out there.
I don't think it's us as individuals. I think you're all lovely people. I like working with you.
Thanks for that disclosure.
Councillor Booth.
I'd like a little bit more of a shakedown on those establishment costs, because it's being thrown back at us at $9 million, which is just crazy. I mean, you could set up a CCO with all your own diggers and trenching equipment for that and actually start doing business. So I think that Mr. Noma needs to be sorted out, and therefore it would lead on to, while that's being done, as the Chief Executive has just indicated, that some assumptions should be done based around it, us doing it alone, and just establishing that entity within our own organisation. The CCO paying ourselves some rent, those transfer of assets, all those things need to be thought about. I guess, unfortunately, it does bugger us up for the operational efficiencies of having scale, which was really the whole idea that I thought would help lower the costs to our ratepayer and provide the services that are going to be required. And unfortunately, with the lack of foresight from some of our friends and the thought that they're just going to coattail onto us, has to be made very clear in our debrief that that's not going to be the case. And if we do set up a CCO with all with the resources that we require, anything that is done for them will be done at commercial rates, and we're making money out of them, because that's the only way they're going to exist. So while one thing may be a little bit disappointing, it may actually create an opportunity for us to make some money out of them.
Whilst I agree with a little bit of that, not all of it, you should never close a door. And so for me, it's about we're all on our own journey, and our neighbours have made their decisions on the information that they've been given, but I don't think we should be closing the door. We're still got a long way to go as well. And so I truly believe that, we're going to flesh this out, and it will work itself out, but I do not agree. We need to keep those doors open.
I think the paper needs to cover off in-house and joint CCO and the standalone CCO, because there are going to be numerous points where decisions have to be made. Even the point of, when do you transfer assets? You may set up a CCO and not transfer assets for quite some time, or you may choose to. And also, I agree with Councillor Scott that I think a number of those other councils have been asking for shared services because they know there are some functions that they just are going to struggle to do. Now, if we did have a CCO, that potentially is the vehicle for that shared services, and we need to think that through. And we also need to be relatively fair in terms of charging to keep us together, because it's really important that we keep together. We don't alienate ourselves in the process.
I need to think on that. Councillor Shannon.
Nigel touched on one of my themes that I noted there, that the joint CCO versus the shared services arrangement, that's often been brought up. So, why don't you just work together? So we'll need to have some clarity of what is the difference between the two, and what does that look like financially, so that it can be demonstrated either way, what is the benefit of. And like Boothie was saying as well, and it was the top of my list, the more clarity re the potential CCO stand-up costs and oversight. Because currently the figures that have been thrown around, whether they're in a Martin Jenkins paper or whatever, that says it's going to cost $900,000 for a CCO and CFO, we know that's nonsense for us. We're not going to be paying $900,000 for a CEO and a CFO. So I know it's going to be largely... That's got to be on the front page tomorrow. No, so need to dispel some of the myths and give people more accurate, as best we can, information about those stand-up costs. And also clarity is regarding the separation of territorial authority priorities. And it's not just, again, dispelling the myth on the harmonisation, it's all the associated plans and work. How would we ensure that there is no or more or less cost for each particular territorial authority, and how priorities are maintained and costs are not subsidised by each other? Those are assurances people are looking for as well. These are the consistent things that came through to me. So need to be able to read and see, are these genuine concerns? Are they not? Either way, can we get as much information as possible, please, to clarify those points? The old being swallowed up by Christchurch was one comment, by privatisation and what have you. Can that be reiterated, the impossibility of that in terms of the legislation as it is, and at the same time making it clear? We looked at the last Three Waters model. Government, if they want to, have the power to do what they want anyway. So my thoughts are, under the LGA and even the Companies Act, surely within a CCO you're actually even better protected. But is that not correct? But that question needs to be answered too. And also the rural scheme concerns. I'd like to hear a bit more about that.
Yeah, protections are definitely there. No, thanks. Good questions. Councillor Pye.
Probably similar, but I just wonder if we've clearly and robustly identified the risks and then what the mitigations are. So there's a number of concerns that were raised around privatisation as one, and I think we should clearly set this out, that one, you can't do it legally, and two, under the Companies Act, as Scotty pointed out, needs shareholder approval because it'll be a major transaction. Again, loss of community voice, how do we think we can mitigate that? I don't know if we've been clear enough about what's left behind if we do this, and I think it wouldn't hurt to drag that out again and have a look at that. I'd like a response to Jan's challenge around the legalese of consultation and what our response to that is. Because she appears to have raised a valid point, which I don't agree with, but can we put what the response is there? And how do we... Yeah, I think that was it. But, some of those things around community voice, could be mitigated by ensuring the board has 2 local community members, and that goes in the shareholder agreement. Just things like that about what could and couldn't be included in the shareholder agreement.
And then just a couple from me, I think.
Sorry, harmonisation was
harmonisation.
the other key thing, and how the mitigation to that is to embed it in the shareholder agreement.
Shareholders agreement, yeah, cool. I think we just need to give some thought to, if we have our joint but lonely CCO and the shared services conversation, although that frustrates me that now everyone is going to want shared services when we've been saying, hey, let's work together for the last 6 years. It's only when, now they're going to come wanting potentially, but that's okay. Yeah, that community influence, I just think we need to give some thinking around and be able to tell the story on how does Geraldine community have their say. Yeah, your point, I think, but just what exactly that voice looks like and how they communicate back through. We've seen that in graphs and what have you before, but I just think we need to articulate that. Yep.
Just one other thing. There was a lot of feedback on it's not broken, so don't fix it, which I agree with, but it's very short-sighted, and I don't think we've explained the longer-term strategy well enough, or it's got lost in the noise. And so maybe in that paper we can include what is coming at us and why we might need access to more funding to pay for that, or to combine to get better economies of scale so we can deliver that CapEx cheaper.
Yeah, I'd like more information definitely on that BioWave that we've been talking about. You know, what is coming our way. I need clearer understanding of that, I think.
Yeah, we have, but it's just...
We've got it, but the community, it's got lost in the noise with the community.
Yeah. I think to keep it really simple, if we didn't leverage that extra headroom, the projects that we'd have to pull, what does that look like as far as under-investment of capital back into the system? Just something really simple, just as an example. Anything else? I think everyone sort of, just so we can, the guys can shape a paper the team can shape a paper for next week.
Nigel, I just think we need to acknowledge somewhere the stranded overheads too.
Yes. Yeah, that's what's been picked up, yeah. And obviously, we need just to have something probably written from DIA as well, or let's have the conversation and see what they might, or we'll invite them, I think, anyway, to present next week, and what that looks like if we are currently in a joint lonely CCO. That's a new technical term under the Act, lonely. And then what that means. That's cool. So anything else that anyone wants to put forward for consideration for the paper, Councillor Booth?
We were given a paper on the 25th of February around about the local water done well financials, and perhaps if that, obviously it's probably just reiterating, there's work being done.
Yeah.
So it's actually just a simple matter of going back and revisiting them based on what we know now.
Yeah.
The CFO's doing both what the water looks like and what the council looks like if you went to a CCO. So that's getting done.
Yeah. Confident?
Yeah, no, she is.
Yeah.
Well, costs of setting up a board.
Yeah, there's a structure in there. We'll just revisit that structure. So if it was I think short term, if you did a lone CCO, it would look quite different to medium long term, because you would actually probably have a board, but you'd run it out a year.
You could have a different approach to a board. You could have a council staff board. You could, I don't know, it's not perfect, but you could. You reckon?
I guess I'd like to see some external expertise.
Yeah, for sure.
Giving continuity and direction, and current knowledge and infrastructure and pipes and water and etc.
Actually, that was something that came up, as well as how is board appointed and what have you. So maybe just a graph or something on what that looks like as far as skills matrix, etc. Just to address that. Anything further?
Just, I might be overthinking it, but legally, is there a difference between a joint CCO and just a council-controlled organisation, or is it just the same thing?
Earlier on, Martin Jenkins presented to us the difference between a WSO, Water Service Organisation, and a CCO. My view is you need a water service organisation, and there's no difference between whether it's joint or single.
Yeah, under legislation, it is separate. Yeah.
So Waitaki and Mackenzie, we know they're going alone, but in terms of what's their preference in terms of what they're doing, are they setting up their own CCOs?
No, in-house.
Just staying
straight out
in-house.
in-house, yeah.
Yeah. What's interesting, though, there is, as of yesterday, still discussions, even with Waimate, across the four councils, CE's talking about, sort of next steps. So I think this is interesting in the fact that communities might think this is a close to these conversations, but it's not at all. It needs to continue. So, there's a few hurdles that'll come through, but let's take that day by day. I think a bit more will come out from DIA this week and potentially on their feedback on Mackenzie's decision.
I think we also probably in this paper need to cover downlands, because if you decide to set up a CCO, downlands will naturally go into it. Therefore, does all of downlands go into it, and therefore Waimate and Mackenzie's got a small shareholding? That needs to be thought through as well.
We're the main shareholder, they wouldn't have any choice, would they?
The way it's structured, I think it would be up to them. So if there's nothing further that you want considered for the paper, otherwise if there's anything that's burning, flick an email through to Nigel and Andrew. So we'll go back to the recommendations, 1, 2, 3 and 4. 4 was what we've just discussed about, particular topics and themes. I'm happy to move them as a whole. Councillor Burt, seconder. Any further discussion? No, put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. That's it. Team, well done. Thank you. It was a good morning and good to hear from our community. Thanks, everyone.